Hi, my name is Carson Stilson. I am the owner and founder of Wairworthy.
Carson, what's going on, man? Welcome to the Pilot podcast.
Dude, thanks for having me. Glad we made it happen.
Absolutely. It's been a long time coming. I've had the last couple months have been pretty wild with transitioning jobs and trying to get the podcast game back going up. And I can't think of a better person than the first podcast in a couple weeks. So it better be a good one. It's kind of all on your shoulders right now. I can only do so much, man. It's up to you whether it sinks or swims. All right.
I'll try my best.
Well, I love it, man. Well, first question I ask everyone is why aviation? What was it about flying that got you interested in aviation?
Yeah, growing up, I loved like Flight Simulator. I remember one of my favorite Christmas presents I ever got as a kid was my parents bought me the Flight Simulator yoke that I could plug into my computer and I could fly the plane. I know it felt very legit. I mean, it was like the full Christmas, let's be real. And but it was worth it. It was amazing, and I really just loved flying around, exploring. I was super nerdy about it. Like as a kid, I was like, I'm going to download the higher resolution scenery, and like I just really loved flying a lot. And my dad also was passionate about flying, and he ended up getting his private pilot certificate and buying a Cessna 172 when I was in high school. And so I got to do about 10 or so hours of flying. I was lucky enough that he, didn't charge me, of course, anything for the plane, but I had to just pay for gas. And so it was a very nice setup. But back then in the late 2000s, gas was still really expensive and I was making very little. I worked at the airport. I would clean airplanes. And it was not 1 hour of work was like a couple gallons of gas. So it became very expensive very fast. And so I was like, I want to take girls on dates and stuff. So I gave up aviation for a little while. And then fast forward into around 2020, it came to a position where I was able to make it happen. So I did, and finally got my private pilot certificate.
It's really funny. I feel like I've said this before too. And I feel like so many people are like, there's so many ways you can make money in aviation. You can go clean airplanes. You can do this. It's like, well, cleaning airplanes is probably one of the harder ways to make money to fly airplanes. And it might be fun to some people, but it was a pain for me. It takes way longer than I thought. It wasn't worth the hourly rate that I was getting. I was like, I'm done. I think I washed one plane for my flight school, maybe two. My dad helped me and I hit my head on too many things and hit my shoulder on too many. I was like, I'm done. Can't do this anymore. This is it. Justin's detailing business is over with.
Yeah, it was brutal. And I cleaned a lot of like helicopters and a couple other things that were just really tough to clean, and they always wanted it spot. Like they would go on a flight and get it just covered in bugs and come back and be like, okay, I want it clean for the next person that comes in like a few hours.
Like what?
And it was brutal, but it was a good job. It got me around airplanes and it got me into aviation. I would always tell people, because I worked technically for a mechanic who would then outsource me to clean some other people's planes. So I'd always tell people I was an aircraft mechanic, but no, I was just scrubbing bellies. But high school me, I was like, I got to not just sound like I'm a glorified custodian for aircraft.
Pretty much. But what's
it was great though.
One of my buddies actually made a multi-million-dollar company out of cleaning airplanes. And he went from starting off on his own, just cleaning airplanes. And now he has contracts with airlines, with regionals, it's just like, dang, dude, good for you. You did something that I didn't want to do. And you turned it into a legit business, and you have some pretty sick airplanes and have a lot of fun. So good for you.
He went the smart way. I was stuck with the beater 172s and then the occasional nice helicopter. Yeah. So I wasn't quite at that point to make it to the next level of aviation cleaning.
So you mentioned that your dad was in aviation. Was there any other kind of family aviation in your family, or was it just you two?
No, it was really just us. And he is also still only a private pilot. He just wanted to do it as a hobby. He did construction and stuff for most of his life, and it was comfortable enough. Like we were never like loaded by any means, but we were comfortable enough that we could, take on some of those hobbies and do that. And I think him having it as a hobby made me want to have it as a hobby and not necessarily pursue it for a career. which is kind of changing, but not in the same way that most pilots look at a career. I'm not flying for money. I'm making aviation a career in other ways. So,
I mean, make content for flying. So technically, you're flying for money with the content. If you say,
yeah, you'd be surprised how little I fly in my content. Everybody teases me. They're like, "Yeah, you have an airplane and you just sit in it in front of your hangar and make silly videos." So shockingly, I own an airplane to just sit in it and make ridiculous content.
Hey, you got the airplane part down. A lot of people just want the airplane. So you got the airplane part down. So now you just got to fly more.
Yeah, no kidding.
I usually talk about social media last, but since we kind of brought it up a little bit, talk a little bit about social media for you. I feel like you kind of just like came up and all of a sudden, boom, and it was just everywhere. Like you came out, I saw the Kickstarter, the funny videos, and it just seemed like you were just on this freight train that just like wasn't slowing down, which is awesome to see because a lot of people come in, they start posting a couple videos and they get frustrated and they go away and they just don't ever keep doing it. But dude, you have been killing it, continually killing it, and coming out with hats, coming out with shirts. So I guess the first question is, what was the original plan for this all to happen? Or did this kind of happen just by chance and you're rolling with it?
Yeah. So Wairworthy started out, I think one of the reasons it's succeeded so far, I'll say this, is Wairworthy started out as an apparel and wearables and flight bag company before it was ever anything else. So I started it, and Wairworthy was started because as I was going through my flight training in 2020, I was super unhappy with the amount of stuff available for pilots. There just wasn't a good selection of, in my opinion, high quality flight bags. There were a lot of products that I felt were at the lowest bar of quality. And this is coming from someone who I really was impressed by, like Peak Design and Nomadic and some of these other very high end bag companies. And I was like, why is there not one for aviation? I feel like there are lots of different kinds of pilots. And there are, of course, the pilots who are like, I want my, Walmart shopping grocery bag as my flight bag. And that's fine. Like they want to spend all their money on aviation, and that's great. Yeah. And I honestly respect those individuals who they just need something to carry it. But then there's those who are like, I really want something that represents me. I fly a Cirrus, or I fly a bush plane that I'm really passionate about. I mean, heck, even bush planes are turning into $500,000 airplanes now. It's ridiculous. But, there's people who really want something that just is high quality and represents pilots and has something built for every single thing they have in a really compact and thought out way. And so I created Wairworthy and started with kind of getting my flight bag design, and just was like, hey, I'm going to start posting some social media stuff because I was planning to launch this Kickstarter with this reinvented new flight bag that I was coming out with. And I started posting, and like my third post went viral, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. I got 2 million views just making something silly. In fact, my first video, I was literally just like grabbing like the controls of my airplane, and it like all the squeaks made a song. Yeah. And it blew up. And so then I was like, I'm going to keep doing this. And I kept posting. And then a few days later, another one went viral. And all of a sudden it just turned into, every week, I almost had a post that did 1 million+ views, and it just kept going and going. And in May of 2021, when I started, it was May of 2022. I had like 120 followers. By the time I launched the Kickstarter in August of 22, I had about 10,000 followers. And then combined across all my stuff, now 2 years later, we're at almost 800,000 followers. So it's been just absolutely skyrocketed. It's been really, really fun to watch. And a lot of people like the content, but then they love the gear and the stuff we're launching.
Have you always been funny? Has this always been like, have you always made people laugh? I know your wife probably has a different price, but he's not funny at all. I don't get why anyone follows him, but like, have you always enjoyed making people laugh? Or is this just like you turn on a camera and you just came up with this character?
I have always loved being a lighthearted individual. Everything I do, I try to be pretty lighthearted with and bring humor into things. I was like in high school, I did like the drama and the acting and singing and all that stuff. And so it's funny, I did that thinking I was going to be a news reporter. That's kind of what I went to college and started going to college for, but then ended up dropping out of that to take up video production and making commercials. I used to be like the creative director of Squatty Potty, which is the viral toilet stool company that was on Shark Tank. And so like I just kind of like kept grabbing into things that were humorous and doing funny things. And I think I was like, man, I always was so attached to, you can really capture people's attention with comedy, and just by making people smile and laugh, it works. And it's been great.
When did, better question would be like, for me, whenever I started posting, it was me having the fear of my high school friends or people that I grew up with always like being like, dude, what are you doing? Like, this is embarrassing. You're not an influencer. Was it similar for you? Did you have any fears of starting? Cause I know a lot of people, like I mentioned in the beginning, they come out strong. They start posting and then they get discouraged. People bring them down, or they just kind of realize that it may not be for them. But was there anything that discouraged you from starting to post, or even in your journey that you're at now, where you are right now?
I would say, I got teased a little bit when I started like buying cameras to like start, and I was like, oh, I'm going to start filming stuff. And they're like, oh, you're going to be Trent Palmer. And I was like, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever be Trent, but I figured, I was like, let's see what I can do, and I really leaned into the short form content. But those same people that kind of teased me in the beginning were also my biggest supporters. They were always the first people to buy stuff from me, and they were always the ones to text me and be like, dude, that was awesome. Like, I have a really stubborn friend who is a great friend of mine, who I've got. He would never laugh at anything I did, but then his wife filmed him in bed laughing at one of my videos. And I was like, that to me, I was like, that's how I knew I made it. I knew I was funny enough when I had my, like, one of those like very true, like, cowboy pilots who like won't smile at you, but was laughing at one of my content. And he would never do that to my face, but he did it privately. I was like, okay, if I can make him laugh, then I'm clearly doing enough things right. So I never really felt super intimidated. And, I, like a lot of influencers, you kind of have to let stuff just kind of brush off you. I mean, there's, especially with my airplane build, I have, half of my followers, I'm pretty sure, are watching to see if I turn it into a lawn dart or if I actually like fly the plane. And so there is definitely, it can be really interesting just on social media in general. But most of my friends and people who I've been close with have been extremely supportive.
That's good, man. Yeah, it's really interesting when social media and just how it works. And a lot of people that criticize are usually the ones that watch you the most and give you the most engagement, right? But that's really cool to see how your friends have been very supportive, even the ones that you didn't think you'd be able to convert. But I do love the idea of kind of why you started in this beginning, and just the fact that you realized there needed to be a change and there wasn't something on the market that you liked. And I have to agree. I mean, the bag situation hasn't changed in what feels like 100 years since the first flight. It's like, I feel like Orville and Wilbur were rocking the same bags back then with from Sporties with their initials on the back of it. So it was a much needed change to see some new attire come out here. So kudos to you for doing that and attacking it and going for it. But it's been awesome to see.
Yeah, thanks, man. And I feel that way with a lot of stuff in aviation. I feel like they're the kings of aviation in a lot of things, who are just like the leaders at making an exceptional products. The Bose, the Garmins, those who just like really do that. And I'm like, there can be someone in the apparel space too. And I feel like that spot hasn't been taken. And so I'm like, I'm one man band, but I'm out here to make it happen. So
are you apparel only? Do you see like a bigger world where, we got headsets, we got pivot cases or anything like that? Or what's the end game, I should say?
Anything is possible. I'll say that. Right, yeah, cool. Anything is possible. I really do like leaning into the wearables. That's kind of everybody was like, why Wairworthy? What is Wairworthy? But like, the reason I made Wairworthy was essentially it's stuff worth wearing. It's wearworthy stuff. Like, and of course it plays into airworthy and all of that. So it's just kind of that play on words, but I really like it being stuff that you wear or take with you flying. So could it turn into more? Maybe. I'm kind of trying to find the best places. Like, the flight bags have been exceptional. Like, people love them. I get such positive reviews on, honestly, everything we've launched has been so well received, because I take a year to develop every single product I make, at least. Like, I'm really hands-on with everything. I go and I use it. I find the best possible materials. And yeah, I'm not selling the, $40 bag, but I'm also, a lot of my materials cost almost that much, it's just a very different field where when you're looking to like deliver the highest quality thing as opposed to the cheapest that someone will spend money on. So, because I have a lot of passion behind things, I don't launch products as fast as a lot of my competitors do. They're much larger companies with dozens or hundreds of employees. I literally, like I said, it's just me. So I go in and I hand do everything myself and make sure if I like it, I know that other pilots will like it. And so that's why I'm very particular. So yes, could other things happen? Absolutely. But we'll see.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like we could have a whole nother podcast just on the business side of everything and how just things come together and how it's not overnight. People see this success with a bag, but they don't realize, like you said, years plus trying to figure out how to source everything and make it all work out. So we can touch more on that a little bit later if we have some time, but I feel like there's just so much to learn in that and figuring it out is just like a master class. And I feel like you need to go to college for 4 years just to to navigate that space.
Yeah. And crazy enough, I'm a college dropout. I wanted to pursue passions and I became a very passionate individual. I have mixed opinions on higher education, depending on what you're doing. But for product development and design and starting your own company, I think there's so many amazing things you can learn from individuals. But yeah, you're right. I mean, launching Wairworthy alone was a huge risk. If it didn't go where it did, I don't know if it would still be here today because it was a massive investment on my part. And, even now, I don't really make a lot of money because I pour everything back into the company to launch new products and to continue to grow it. It's a challenging space, and aviation in general is a very challenging space to launch successful products.
Yeah. And what was the support system like when you started this? Like you said, it's a huge financial risk to start any company, especially one that takes a lot of investment and a lot of time to make back that money. And then when you start putting that money back into the company rather than, buying houses, or maybe your wife wants a new car or the kids want whatever, it just it can get kind of difficult. But talk a little bit about, support system, wife, kids, family. What was your wife like when you're like, hey, I want to use this big chunk of money and I want to make a bag? It's probably like, you're going to make a bag?
Yeah, I will say I have the most supportive wife on the planet. She has been incredible during this whole thing. She's an extremely hard worker herself and has a very successful photography business. It's kind of funny. I do video, she does photography. So that's made things cheaper for us because we tend to buy equipment both of us can use. And awesome. That makes a lot of sense for us. But she has believed in me always. She's one of those people that always is like, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything type thing. So she's been very, very supportive of me. So that's been great. Of course, we had the realism of, okay, if it reaches this goalpost, we can keep going. If it starts to not, we got to pull back. We have to, you got to be calculating in your risks. But, I've been part of lots of companies that started off of taking big leaps of faith. And, so I very much believe in it. And I believe if you have the passion and you can prove that there's an audience there who's willing to do that, you can make just about anything happen. So I'm definitely a dreamer. I'll say that. I'm definitely a dreamer.
Well, I mean, a lot of people are dreamers, right? Like, I mean, I'm looking out a window right now and looking at airplanes, and a lot of people look at airplanes the same way we do, but they don't actually go become one. There's a difference between being a dreamer and actually putting the action in to make a dream happen. A lot of times the first step is the hardest step. And I think you'd probably agree to that too. It's just like being like, all right, we're doing it. We're going to put in whatever X amount of money it is. I'm going to China or wherever it is to go look at materials, and we're going to make it happen.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. That first step is it's the leap. Let's be real. It's the first leap. Yeah.
And a lot of people, you probably similar, but I want to be a pilot. I'm an engineer. I'm a banker, but I keep looking at airplanes like, well, dude, go to the airport. We got you. Take an intro flight. It's just going trying to make it happen.
Yeah. And honestly, that was one of the cool things too, is as I've just gotten to know more and more people in aviation, there's so many people who are willing to essentially take the shirt off their back and help you, support you, test products, take you on flights. I remember one of the products I was looking to launch was like I have to be kind of private about this one because this one has a much bigger thing, but essentially it had to do with some military stuff. And I remember a Black Hawk pilot came and landed at the airport, and he was like, I just asked him, he's like, yeah, come look at this. And if you could do this and solve this, and like, they're just, people are so willing to, if you cater to them, they're willing to cater to you in so many ways. And a lot of times as someone who's just looking for an intro to something and to get into aviation, I don't know a more friendly and open and like inviting community than pilots, because we're just passionate. We just want more pilots. We just love it.
100%.
When more pilots come, it keeps our passions alive because it allows us to keep doing it. So
for sure. And like you said, everyone wants to give back, right? The aviation can look like it's a really difficult industry to break into, but it's really not. We're just a bunch of nerds that just don't know what the hell else to talk about other than flying. So it might seem like really technical. It's like we just don't know how to approach anyone else without talking about it the way we do. So once you just come in and make that first step, it's like your family automatically. So just come on over, just talk to anyone, especially at an airport. You can strike up a conversation and have lifelong friends from just getting free crappy coffee at an airport.
And then I think the same thing goes to pilots too. The more you outreach, the more people want to be involved. Like, it's interesting off the end of, and I do it every year. There's a school, an elementary school right off the end of our runway in St. George. And because they're so close to the airport, they named themselves the Aviators, and they called me and a couple other pilots in before the first year and said, help us make this school aviation themed. And so we came up with their school motto, which is aviate, navigate, communicate, and just took in all these things that they can then apply to the students. And then, like, we do the flyover on the first day of school every year. And I just see it all the time as I go into the school and I become involved in that. All the kids that are just so passionate about aviation, all of a sudden, it's like, once you create that fire and become involved, you'd be shocked at how many kids are like, I would love to be a pilot now. Like, oh my gosh. Like I literally, I'm like, I want to do a study one day to see of all the kids that went to this school, how many end up becoming pilots, because, or if you like made a theme of any school off of a trade, or rather than just like I'm a Mustang, like kids can't grow up to be horses. So why don't we make the welders might be a little weird, but I don't know, the blacksmiths or maybe the plumbers. I don't know if people want to be the plumber, but maybe it's a great trade skill. So that's the thing. I really wonder if that's going to, the more we influence people, the more they are like, I want to be part of it. So I think that's also one of the reasons why I became an influencer, is like, I'm passionate about it. I don't think I'm delivering a bad message. I mean, some mildly inappropriate messages sometimes, but I think the push to encourage people into aviation, and especially in my passion, experimental and backcountry aviation, I think will draw a lot of people.
Yeah, I would agree. And you mentioned earlier before we started talking about your company, but you mentioned that your dad kind of showed you aviation as a hobby. Was there ever kind of on your path of aviating, of flying, was there ever a pull toward flying as a profession, or was it always just, I'm going to pursue the things that I'm very passionate about to make money, and keep this as a hobby and something that I want to do for fun?
Yeah, I think I was always concerned for me that if I started doing it for work, I would lose some of that warmth and excitement that came from doing it for fun. I just truly feel like joy of being able to get in a plane and go somewhere or see the sights. I mean, I live in southern Utah, and honestly, I don't know that there's a more beautiful place to fly than, I mean, you're a 20-minute flight from like 5 or 6 national parks. Like, you're so close to just some of the most incredible places to fly. And I just eat that up. And I think for me, if I had to turn that into work, I was concerned that I would lose that passion of just hobby flying and flying for fun. And I've kind of felt that, like, with my video production. I think early on, I was really passionate and excited to produce content for companies and stuff like that. And now I'm like, well, I want to do it for myself, and I want to change what I'm doing. I don't want to just film a commercial. I want to film something that's enjoyable. I want to tell a story. I want to have fun. And I think as I've been growing Wairworthy, I've been trying to pivot it towards things that I want to do for the rest of my life, that I find enjoyment in. But that's also me. I think I've got like a little bit of that itch to make sure what I'm doing isn't just like dragging and boring. It's got excitement and passion behind it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a case for whatever you make as your profession has the opportunity to, and at all times, it's eventually going to pull you into a spot where you're like, man, I don't know if I like want to do this tomorrow. It's like, I would love a day off. Right. So I think being able to figure that out early is huge, which is very difficult to do, especially a couple of years ago. I mean, even it's still not going to be like this forever. Like the airline industry is going to be booming again. They're going to hire again. They're going to do all that. But when you see new contracts, when you see the money a professional pilot can make, and you hear about the crazy stories about, a Delta captain making $800,000 and his profit sharing checks like $70,000, you're like, oh, I mean, I could do that. Like I can fly planes, but realizing early on that it's something that you want to keep as a hobby, I think is very important. And it will keep you from becoming that person that, maybe doesn't want to do this profession. And there are some pilots that fly professionally that have those viewpoints. They're like, man, I can't wait to retire. It's like, dude, you got one of the 6 jobs in the country, like in the world right now. You just get to look out a window all the time and fly. But it happens to everyone, I think. And I'm sure even as just a professional or as a private pilot or a CFI or someone that just does it for fun, it can happen for that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have so many friends at the airport who are airline pilots who are starting to get back into the general aviation side. And, they're the ones that are like, I'm going to hustle. I'm going to get as many hours as possible. And they're the ones that are like, I'm going to work 10 hours a month, take their absolute minimum, because that's the beauty of, I think, the airline industry is that there's so much flexibility. You can be as aggressive and go for as many flights as you'd like. And then there's those who are like, I want to take what I have to take, but then I want to live my life. And so it's been fun watching kind of that. I just think there's a lot of flexibility in the aviation industry. And so definitely. I'm just taking one path. Mine just happens to be selling to pilots as opposed to flying. So.
You want to take other people's money.
Yeah, that's the goal. Honestly, I want to be asleep and wake up and be like, oh, beautiful. I sold 5 bags last night.
Yeah. Make one more funny video and I'll sell 5 more.
That's the goal. I just want one ridiculous video at a time.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting about aviation, kind of what you just said. And when I started the podcast, I didn't realize how many different stories are to tell. I think I've done 300 plus of these, and I feel like every single podcast still has a different journey to where they got. And a lot of times the end goal is the exact same. The end goal is, hey, I'm flying for a major airline, but what happened between hour 5 and hour 1500 is completely different most of the time than a lot of people, which is just mind blowing to me. It's like one guy I knew flew to Tabria, like a couple 100 miles off the ocean fish spotting. It's like, well, I don't know if I'll do that, but 2, it's like, it's just really interesting how you can use aviation to either benefit the world. You could be flying missionary. You could be flying for, bush pilots or up in Alaska. You could be doing crazy stuff that helps people. And then you can also be helping fishermen, or you could just be doing it for fun. It's just insane what it can do and the impact it can have on a personal level, and for the importance of GDP or just countries or villages in general. Yeah, no, it's been fun. I think, especially doing this as an influencer. I've just gotten to meet so many other pilots who have made, they are influencers as well, who all do completely different things in aviation. Like there's the ones who are the teaching side of influencing, the traveling adventure side, the missionary pilots. Like you said, there's so many cool avenues to aviation. It really is just an amazing group that is capable of anything. It's really cool. Talk a little bit about your actual flying journey. So talk about young Carson, determining where he's going to go fly, how he's going to go fly, what airplane you're going to choose. Kind of talk a little about the beginning steps of Carson figuring out his way through a 150 or 172 or whatever it was your first flight lesson was in. Yeah, so I did a lot of my first flying in 172s. Great airplane. I was always very happy in a 172. I think from the beginning, I was always drawn towards that backcountry aviation. Mm-hmm. And so I think with that in mind, I didn't quite know what direction I wanted to go, because there was the other side of me that wanted to be able to travel with my family. I mean, I had a young kid and another one on the way when I was doing my private pilot certificate. And so then I really hustled through it. I got my pilot certificate. Really, it could have been 2 months, but waiting a month on the DP, it turned into 3. And so it was a pretty quick
jaunt through. It was during the height of the pandemic. And so, nobody else was flying. I mean, it was one of those things where you could like go fly, and we did like my towered landing in Vegas. And I swear I could have probably asked McCarran International Airport or Harry Reid, whatever it is now, to let me come and land there. It was a very interesting experience because it was very calm and quiet. But it was really exhilarating because then I just would fly and do all my training here. After I got my flight private pilot certificate done, I started flying with a friend. We kind of would split time and safety pilot each other, getting ready, like working towards our instrument rating in a little Cessna 150. And, it turned into one of those things where it was like $40 an hour to fly. It was awesome. We would just like, hey, let's go spend a weekend. We'll just jump to places and get as many hours as we can. And shortly after that, I bought a part ownership in a Mooney M20J. So I had my first plane that I bought and owned a share of. And that was an exceptional plane. I love Moonies. It was so fast for how fuel efficient it was. It took my family on a lot of fun adventures, and then sold that and bought into the Rand's S20 Raven that I own now, which is kind of like a Frankenstein plane. It has the fabric body, but it has the metal S21 wing. And so it's got a lot of the capabilities of the more powerful S21 outbound. But so that's the plane that most people see in my videos. That's the plane I fly. I fly once or twice a month. It's not super common because I go to the airport and I decide I can go fly my plane, or I can go build my Zenith that I'm currently working on. I'm building this kit plane. And so a lot of times the building takes over and I go, I need to spend some time working on this plane because my goal is to get it to Oshkosh next year. And I gotta hustle to get this thing done. But it's been an adventure, and I still fly backcountry and do all that, but just when I get the chance.
What was the determining factor of the previous planes that you bought into? Obviously one is a lot faster than I imagined the other one being. So did your needs change? Did your wants change? Kind of talk about the Mooney versus the plane you're currently in now, and then eventually up to the Zenith. Yeah,
so I still think the Mooney fits my needs now, because I would really love to throw my family in a plane and go on adventures on the weekends. When I sold out of that, my wife still gives me a hard time for selling out of that plane. That's the nice thing. And my wife is very supportive, and she's mad that I sold the Mooney because she loved that. I mean, we would take what would be a 7.5 hour drive. I mean, we're right next to the Grand Canyon here, and a lot of places that are very limited road wise to get somewhere. So I can get to Phoenix in an hour and a half, as opposed to a 7+ hour drive. And so it really was that time machine for us. We could really save so much time, and we could go down and do something for a couple days in the weekend. And it wasn't like we had to dedicate a full day to travel. It was, let's leave at 7 a.m. We get there at 8:30 or 9, and then we spend the whole day doing something. We could fly back the next morning. And so it was really, that was really awesome. And my needs haven't changed. I plan to build, I feel like now I'm very tied into having to build airplanes, just because now a lot of my pages become experimental of building my own aircraft. So I plan to build a 4-seat aircraft at some point. Any 4-seat kit plane manufacturers that make fast 4-seat airplanes, if you're watching this, I am looking. But I plan to do something again at some point. But no, I just really wanted that backcountry. I think really, and honestly, Trent Palmer, again, is a big play into that. He's a good friend now, and someone I really look up to is what he's kind of done for backcountry aviation. He's kind of created a new golden age for bush flying, in my opinion. And what he's done just to encourage people to go out and explore, I immediately attached to that. And so that's why I jumped on the Rands, which is an incredible, very capable aircraft. And so I really, because of where we live and the rules in Utah to be able to land and explore, there's just so much freedom for us to go and use it the way that it's meant to be used. So while I would love to own a Mooney again, the finances didn't make sense to own 2 planes. So the Rands is where it's at for now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy what Trent was able to do for backcountry. I mean, I grew up in the East Coast. I grew up in North Carolina. Yeah, we have mountains, but I mean, it's not something we think about all the time when you don't live in the mountains. It's a good 3-hour drive from where I grew up. But backcountry wasn't even something that I knew was really an option. I mean, obviously I've heard about it. I've heard about what you can do with the Cub and the fun you can have, but what Trent was able to do, and even to an extent, some like the Flying Cowboys, and then you get the Padies, and just seeing what you can do with an airplane, you're just like, oh my, one, you guys can be crazy. And it's like, there's no way you could ever see me doing half the stuff you're doing. Like skidding across water. It's just like, wow, that looks awesome. But like, no, I'm good. Thanks. I'll leave that for you guys. Leave it for the pros. But it's really cool just to see, just like we kind of talked about earlier, about what you can do in an airplane. It's just cool. You can, there's so many different things that you can do. And the visuals of backcountry flying, it's really hard to beat how much fun that is. Maybe the flying a Caravan on floats or a Kodiak on floats out in the Bahamas, that's probably up there with how much fun you can have. But even then, probably not the same. But it's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, and I think a lot of people don't realize how much aviation is the lifeblood for some of those communities in Alaska or even the backcountry of Idaho. And when you start to see it as that, and you learn the respect. In fact, I would say that I've not seen a group of pilots more respectful for the limitations they're flying against than I have with backcountry pilots. And there's, honestly, I'm part of a couple like groups that are just all about backcountry education and making sure the way you're flying around mountains and mountain flying in general is very safe, and they share their experiences, the mistakes they've made. And it's just a group that, while they definitely are pushing the limitations of safe flying, they're doing it in a way that is so thought out and educated that it is truly a safe way to approach it. They're doing it the best way that they can. And so honestly, like, a lot of these pilots are so capable and just, it's funny because you don't think of how many pilots are like practically like weathermen and mathematicians and stuff. Like, you have to get all these really intense skill sets to really understand some of the complex characteristics of flying in the mountains and in the backcountry. And it's really cool to see. So I just really have been drawn to these individuals, and I love that type of aviation, even though I know that there's definitely some inherent risks to flying in those places.
Yeah. So this is kind of maybe a controversial question. I told you before that I don't want to ask you any questions. I'll get you in trouble. But this one may be controversial. I'm not entirely sure. We'll see where it goes. But what would you say the best state for backcountry flying is?
Oh, man. I would say probably Alaska is going to win in general, because they have such a,
I guess that was
lower 40. I would say Alaska is always going to win, because like literally, like, they are built around backcountry aviation. No state relies on aviation as much as Alaska does, period. Yeah. There's no other state. So they will win. If we're going lower 48, I would probably say Idaho or Utah, with Nevada in close third. But I think that there's going to be a lot of people who agree or disagree. I really, there's individuals, there's groups like the Utah Backcountry Pilots Association, which I'm a part of, that really fight, and they work closely with like state legislatures and the BLM to ensure that backcountry access is thought of. And like, there are strips that have been like grandfathered in to allow pilots, even though now they're closed off to off-road traffic, they still allow pilots to land there, because they're great access for if someone gets hurt. Like, there's a backcountry airstrip that a pilot can land and go help someone. I really do believe that Utah has an exceptional backcountry, but I think there's just Idaho is probably the winner in the lower 48, just because again, that need for backcountry aviation when you get up into the Salmon River and some of those places where like you can only get supplies in either on like a mule or an airplane. So it creates this need.
Yeah, the mule doesn't sound very fast. I was also surprised that Arkansas has like a low-key, pretty big backcountry. Maybe it's just a small section of the state. It's not going to be necessarily the whole state, but the northwest part of Arkansas, I've heard, has a pretty solid backcountry flying community. Yeah,
absolutely. They've got like the Arkansas stuff they do. Yeah. And, there's like Trevor Dozen Aldridge. He's got his Patriot aircraft now. He really likes to go and explore there. And, I really love seeing some of that. I've been invited multiple times to go explore the backcountry there, and I haven't yet. But when the Zenith's done, maybe. I really do. It is very different. It is a very tree heavy backcountry. Here it is very desert. You're on mountains. And the elevation. I mean, I'm landing. We have some property here that is at 7,300 feet elevation, and density altitudes well into the tens when it's hot in the summer. And in Arkansas, it's just not like that. What was that? Sorry.
How long is your runway?
It's 2,100 feet, but like 500 feet in the beginning you can't use. If you go in one way, it's no go around. You can use it for takeoff, but you can't land with it. It's on like a ridge, so it's like an aircraft carrier landing, and then there's a 9-degree slant on the runway. It's a very technical runway. You would only I had some friends come in and land it with like their Cubs and their Kit Foxes and stuff, and they were like, "Oh, this is gonna be a breeze. 2,300 feet. That's so long." And then they landed it, and they're like, "You're not opening this to the public. This is not. There's no way. It's just there's too many things that once you add them all together, it becomes a very technical runway, even though it's long." So
is this your own personal private strip then?
Yep. So my family, we bought like 120 acres in southern Utah. It's just south of a city called Beaver, Utah. It's up in the mountains. We've put up some little container home cabins. We've got this awesome runway that we've cut out. It's pretty great. We're excited to I will probably invite individuals to come. I just know that someone's going to think they can come in like a Cessna 150 or a 172 that's fully loaded, and they're going to die. And I don't want that. And so I have to be very vetting on who I allow to. Yeah, it's a very technical runway, and I just need to make sure people are aware of that. And so 2,300 feet can be deceiving in the wrong way. You can think, "Oh, I've got this. This is great," and it goes away very fast. So,
I always think,
but yeah.
I always think it's interesting when I used to fly private, and when I would go into these small airports, in the mountains, I'm like, if you would have put it this way, it just makes so much more sense. It's like, why didn't they just build it over here, just like 5 miles over that way? It's clear. There's no mountains. You go straight in, you're fine. And similar to the strip you're talking about right now, was this the only place you could build it, or were you guys like, no, we're going to make an airport? All right, we're going to make one.
It was. It was the only place that we could have put it based on the land that we purchased. There was a lot of land for sale, but most of it was either deep in a valley, which causes its own risks, or on literally hillsides. So the hillside went up, and then they had just a chunk of area on this mesa and it wasn't even quite a mesa. Like, it's more like a hilltop that we were like, okay, we could fit a decent sized runway there. And so it was the only place that we could do. There are some things we were doing to try to make it safer. Like, for example, I installed a say weather system on there, which is essentially like a really cool weather setup for people who own their own airports. It's really expensive to own an AWOS, but you can install this unit in, and then it communicates with another unit they've got, which then when you're flying, you can click 3 times and get the weather just like you would at any airport. And that's really helpful, especially for wind and density altitude. Like, those are the major players in this airstrip. And so I've installed that to try to mitigate risk, to make pilots realize, okay, this is probably unsafe to land here. We're going to try to cut down some trees. There's some property next to us that we're going to try to get permission from that property owner to allow us, only a few trees on this mountain would then free up that first 500 feet that are really you can't really land because you got to float those trees. We're trying to do everything to mitigate risk, but it might just be one of those places that we only allow certain aircraft and certain skilled pilots to come and attempt.
So one of my dreams is to buy a bunch of land, not in Utah. I mean, that'd be sick. Obviously, I'd love to buy land out there in the West, but North Carolina kids. One of my dreams is to buy a bunch of land in North Carolina and eventually have a grass strip or something like that. So talk a little bit about, there might be other people like that too. They probably have more money than I do and can make it happen. But talk about, is there any legality stuff you got to go through, or can anyone just be like, all right, 2,300 feet, 2,500, 25 feet wide, 50 feet wide, this is my airport. Talk about a little bit who you to get it cleared with. Or were you just like, all right, cool, we're going to land, it's done?
Yeah, in our situation, we didn't need any sort of clearance to do it. In fact, I think in most cases you don't. As long as you own the land, you're allowed to do that. That said, it's always good to be communicating with your neighbors and make sure that they aren't complaining, because the best way to make something not doable is to piss off your neighbors.
Yeah.
So I don't know all the specifics of doing it in a more residential area. I will say we are definitely in the boonies, in the backcountry. We're up against Bureau of Land Management land, and then the land of the guy who sold us our land, who knew what we were doing from the first place. So none of that was really a factor for us. The cool thing is like when you go to Oshkosh or you go to any of these fly-ins, like for example, Oshkosh, and on Facebook, another great place to look, there's like a grass strips and airplane owners associate, like a group where it's literally just people who own their own grass strips. And there are lots of great resources to go and learn what is doable. But from what I've seen, people asking that similar question, it's more of just like, talk with the city, make sure they're good with it. And usually there's nothing that says they can say no, but then also make sure you're communicating with those around you to be like, hey, I want to do this, and bring them brownies and say, I plan to land my airplane here. I'd love to show you it sometime. Like if you keep people around you happy, you tend to be good. And
if you're not having tons and tons of people and you limit to who can come in there, then it's less noise, right? So be a little bit more predictable. Like, hey, Janice, I'm going to be flying over your house at 500 feet here in a couple of minutes. Please don't turn me in, or call someone.
It's very different when it's something that you're just doing for personal use versus all of a sudden you're making a municipal airport or something along like that's very, very high traffic. And obviously we've all seen how municipal airports will build out in the middle of nowhere, and then all of a sudden houses are building all around it, and then those individuals are complaining about an airport. So it's all about just communication and being preemptive in many ways.
What was the most difficult part about training for you and flying?
That's a good question. The most difficult part for me, man, I've been very comfortable with a lot of things. When I went to school, I really struggled with testing, and I think I was not going to have that problem in aviation. I really wanted, like, I studied harder for my written and my, my exam more than I've studied for anything in my life. Yeah. And so, I really thought it would be that, but honestly, I've been things haven't been too challenging when it comes to just, if you put the effort in, if I take time to put the effort in, really look ahead of time, I knew I was going to be able to make it happen. If I just continue to respect the aircraft and respect a lot of things. In fact, I also have a father who is he's very respectful of aviation and as a whole. And I grew up, when I flew with him, he would not, we would avoid certain areas where he knew that there might be inclement weather and things that, and even though you don't see it, like he knows, flying over this portion of Southern Utah, there's like a gorge over here that tends to cause a lot of, very aggressive wind. And he would be really respectful of that. And so I wanted to take that same respect into my flying, but then I also wanted to know, like, to make sure that I wasn't setting personal minimums that were too low, that I couldn't like kind of push and test the boundaries to find those true personal minimums of what was the best way to fly for me. So like right after I got my private pilot certificate, I fly in a municipal airport that has no tower. I spent very little time in the class Bravo, and I knew that I was really weak with Bravo airspace. And so I rented the plane for a weekend. I threw my whole family in, and I'm like, we're going down to Phoenix, and we're going to fly in the class Bravo, and we're going to go find an airport to land, and we're going to spend the weekend there. And I wanted to not have, because I knew I have a lot of people who fly here who don't fly in the Bravo that were scared of that part of flying, and not because they just hadn't done it a lot. And I was like, I'm not going to let that be me. So I think I've done everything I can to not find that struggle in training. Now, I will say now I struggle more because, again, I'm focused on building this plane that I don't fly as much as I should. And the skills that come with flying, the repetition, it definitely can become rusty very fast. And so now I'm trying to make sure I don't let any of those skills atrophy as I, fly a little less during my build, because I'm going to build a plane and then I'm going to think that I can just go take it into the backcountry. But no, I've flown my plane very little over the course of the last 2 years as I've been building. And so I'm going to have to spend some time really getting to learn my plane and respect it again. So
Well, yeah, I think you're head up on a lot of people just understanding that fact, that, yeah, this is something you got to continuously do, right? Like, I mean, these skills can fade quick. I mean, obviously reactions are always going to be there and you kind of revert to training, but the more you fly, the better pilot you are, hands down. So, I mean, it goes with airline pilots, it goes with backcountry pilots, anyone. So just the fact that you're able to recognize that is great. Not everyone's like that. Sometimes even airline pilots aren't like that. Like, oh, I'm fine. I can do this. It's like, oh shoot, that landing sucked.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's awesome to hear. I think that it's definitely, especially what I've seen a lot of people, especially when they're coming up in aviation. I've seen my dad's friends who aren't professional pilots, but just fly on their own, got the private pilot license. And then they have one incident where they scare themselves and they're like, oh, I'm done. I walk away. I'm never doing it again. And that could be class Bravo and just not wanting to get past that fear of what happened. Or it could be something more serious or something happened to the airplane. Just being like, yeah, it's not worth it. Not worth my time anymore. But did you have any instances of that? Did you have any, I want to say close calls, but did you have any like moments where like, oh, okay, is this worth me being in this small plane when I got kids at home? I got a wife at home. Have you ever had any kind of moments like that?
Yeah. When I was in my training, and this is kind of an embarrassing moment. In fact, I've had two close calls. I have one that I talked about previously before, but I had one where when I was in my training, I didn't do a great job of calculating my fuel, and I was so fresh, and I was doing my first solo cross country, and I don't know what happened where the communication ball dropped, but I flew my flight and did not get fuel at my destination. And while I landed and I was still within the minimums to land when I got back to St. George, I realized how close that was. And had I had a headwind, had there been other problems, it could have really turned into a sketchy situation. That was a major one for me. But I think that was one of those really lucky situations where I was able to learn from my mistake. It affected me very seriously. Like I realized how close call that was and how that could have been bad. And it taught me as opposed to scared me from it. It scared me to not let that mistake happen again rather than to not fly again. So I'm very meticulous about my fuel calculations. And again, I was very fortunate to learn one of those lessons and not, have a plane go down. I feel like there's not a lot of times where you get to learn a very serious lesson without bending up an airplane or having to learn it from somebody else making a mistake and losing their life. Mm-hmm. And that was one of those big ones for me. So it really pushed proper flight planning for me very quickly. And so that was it was an embarrassing moment. I was like, wow, what was I thinking in this situation? And so again, very new pilot. I think some things had probably been handed to me and done and made a little easier for me. And I realized then I was like, I am in control of my life when it's just me in this airplane, and I need to treat every flight as if I am the PIC. And so that was a great learning experience. And then I had one where my father and I landed when we were looking for this land where the runway is now. We landed our airplane out there and on that property that we were invited to come visit. And I was just, I had seen other pilots do it where they just take their plane out and they go land it in the middle of the backcountry and it's fine, and I picked out a spot and I was like, yeah, that looks good. And I landed and we landed the plane and I looked and I was like, wow, there were a lot of rocks here that could have really made a very bad day. And I was again, very fortunate to have close call there but not have a problem. And then we got off the ground. And again, we are two people in a pretty heavy in a plane that is almost a light sport. In fact, it is, I think technically is light sport aircraft, with like 3/4 full tank of fuel at 10,000 foot density altitude. Now we have a turbo in our plane, so that does help a lot. We are generating full power, but it was sketchy getting off too. Like just another one of those things I was like, I need to really, again, there's a reason why these backcountry pilots are able to do what they do, and they put a lot of effort into training and being really exceptional at it. And this was really dumb of me to do that, thinking that I could do what they're doing without really educating myself. And so again, very fortunate, didn't bend up a plane, but just learned some serious lessons. So those have been really nice that I've not done anything that's gotten me in trouble or hurt anyone or myself. But two mistakes in my, few hundred hours of flight training that I'm like, okay, I just need to continue to respect aviation.
Yeah. And so a lot of times just slow down a little bit, and every single decision builds up into eventually a big moment, right? The Swiss cheese model. It's like, well, the accident wasn't just this happening. It was actually at 4 a.m. when you didn't sleep well, and it caused all these other incidents to happen, and just your decisions kept building up. Yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, I'm glad a lot of those kind of work out, but sometimes, you have an engine failure, you're just put in a situation where you got to figure out where to put it down, and just hope that you're in a spot where you can land and stop. There's definitely so much respect that needs to be had for airplanes and for flying, so that you can put yourself in the best position possible if something like that does happen.
For sure. Yeah. No, it's, you have to respect aviation so much. I think it's all the little things. Like you said, it's all the little things that add up. So
yeah. Is this, we've almost had you for an hour. Is this the longest you've gone without like cracking a joke or making a funny video?
Yeah, it's, you're pushing it. I think I'm hitting my limit here.
What all ratings do you have? I don't think I asked that. What are you rated for?
I'm a private pilot. I, have some, like I've got my tail wheel and, high performance complex. I've got a decent amount of time, like I said, in the Mooney and some Bonanzas. Yeah. And then, of course, just the backcountry stuff, but private pilot only.
Do you have goals to instrument, commercial, CFI, anything like that?
I would go, I definitely want to get my instrument rating, especially once we're so close to California. And when I've been so deterred from really flying into California, because the next day you want to fly out, you're socked in until like 3 p.m. sometimes or more because of just that marine layer that can come in. And so I'd really love an instrument rating to be able to get in and out of places like that, where it's not necessarily inclement weather, but you just can't break through a cloud layer to get over the mountains to get out of there, it's just going to make me a safer pilot in general. So yes, absolutely instrument rating at some point. And then maybe CFI at some point, just to teach my kids, actually.
There you go.
I don't think I would actually take on students other than my family and maybe some close friends, but that would probably be the only reason I would get it.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, instrument lesson. Yeah, instrument rating, highly recommend, especially for what you're talking about. Or backcountry one day, you're like, I really got to get home, and you take off and get a clearance, and you can get home. Rather than speed running, which I'm sure a lot of backcountry pilots do anyways, and which works. But yeah, I highly recommend the instrument rating. It benefits everyone, family. I'm sure insurance likes it too. I'm sure your insurance would probably look a little better too if you had your instrument rated, especially when you buy that Mooney again.
Backcountry aviation is, oh man, tail wheel insurance is crazy. It's one of the reasons why I'm switching to the Zenith, which is a nose wheel aircraft. Insurance literally like cuts in half. So,
okay, that's good to know. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the Zenith. Obviously it's a big part of your life. It's a big part of what you are putting out there on the internet. So 1, why, 2, how, and 3, kind of what's the end goal? What are the plans?
So first off, Zenith Aircraft Company is like making more light sport aircraft kits than any other company in the world. So when I was looking into backcountry aviation, I had my RANs. And it's an awesome plane. I bought it from a really amazing individual who recently passed away from ALS, who once he was diagnosed, he couldn't fly anymore, but he had the plane built. It was custom to him, and I really loved it. And ever since I've owned it, I've been like, I can't change this plane. It's his. Yeah. In my opinion, like I really respect and care for this man. So I keep it the way it is because it's what he wanted. He was a retired Navy pilot. So it's bright yellow with blue, and he's got the golden wings in the front. But I realized really quickly that I was like, I want a plane that's mine, that I customize every little detail of, and every little thing was made to the way that I wanted it. And so I started looking into experimental aviation more. And I mean, because again, the RANS is experimental. I really feel that personally, experimental aircraft are the future of general aviation. They're just affordable. There's so much flexibility to what you can do with them. And honestly, they're becoming safer and safer all the time. In fact, I think with like a lot of experimental aircraft, I believe the statistics are, depending on the type of engine you put on, if it's a more traditional engine like a Lycoming or one of those types, they are as safe as certified aircraft in many cases. And so I was really trusting in all of what I was doing and saying, okay, let's look into a kit. Maybe I will consider building one. And I reached out to Zenith Aircraft and started a relationship and a conversation with them. And I just saw that their kit was so simple to build compared to most kits. When people think of experimental aviation and kit building now, they're thinking, oh, I've got to lay this out and I got to measure each of the holes and then I got to drill them. And it's just very time consuming. Well, Zenith now uses match hold. It is. It really is. And like, I know people who've built older models of Zeniths who that's what it was. And it's hundreds or thousands of hours of effort. But now with the Zenith CH750 Super Duty, which is the plane I'm building, they've modernized the build process dramatically. It's all match hole drilled. So literally when I say it is like Lego or like IKEA furniture, it is. You line up holes and you put rivets in. And it comes together exceptionally fast. It turns 1,000 to 2,000 hour kit into 500 hours. Okay. And so you can build, if I had the time to build it all the time, I could have had this kit done probably in a handful of months. I don't have that much time, so I have to choose my time wisely. And that's why it's taking, 2 years. But I really, truly believe this has been a really easy process. And talking with them, seeing what's possible, I was like, the capabilities of this airplane absolutely blow my mind. I flew with a next one when I had my RANs and I just watched them just skyrocket up. And then in the end, they were faster than me too. It was crazy. I just watched how capable these were, what they were possible, like what it was possible to do with them. And I was convinced immediately. I was like, this is the plane I got to build.
When you say that you started a relationship, was this the first person was this like the first company you ever reached out to? Was this like, Zenith or nothing? Or did you have like a list of companies like, all right, I got Vance, I got Zenith, I don't know all the backcountry plane names, but was there like a list of?
I will say there are a bunch of exceptional backcountry aircraft kit manufacturers. I mean, you've got Kitfox, you've got RANs, you've got Zenith, you've got, Cub Crafters, you've got a lot of these amazing companies. But for me, it was the Zenith or bust. The way the build process was, I didn't want to work with fabric. I really liked the all aluminum build. Just watching videos on it, the more and more I watched, I was like, this just seems like something that I could get behind, because then I can share with other people how accessible this is for pilots to be able to build your own airplane. I think a lot of people are intimidated by it. And don't get me wrong, you see the Mike Patey's. Mike is an incredible builder, but he's building the most amazing version of something that's possible. And I was like, where are the individuals who are building the most affordable and the most easy to build thing, where I don't need to go way off on the deep end of making it so my airplane can hold dirt bikes, which is incredible. There's a reason why Mike is as incredible as he is. He's a brilliant, brilliant builder, but that's not relatable to a lot of people because they won't be able to do that. So they love to live through it and watch him do it. Whereas I'm like, maybe I will focus on making content that anybody could do. And that someone could say, well, maybe I could build my own plane. And it's been happening. I mean, it's been really cool to see people who are writing me saying, I'm buying a kit. I'm going to go for it. We're going to make it happen. Like they see what I can do and they're like, I'm going to do the same thing. And the airplane is so capable that I think the performance wise, it's just the ultimate backcountry plane for me. It'll get into any of the places any of these other tailwheel aircraft will get into. Save for like the extreme situations where you're landing on a riverbed in Alaska where the rocks are this big, like I probably wouldn't do that like some of these Cubs with like 30 some odd inch tires would do. But anything in Utah and Idaho, I would go into with no problem. And so cheaper insurance, there's just so many reasons why I thought the Zenith was going to be the best option for me.
Now, I'm a big Garmin guy. I got the Garmin Polo on, got the Garmin watch. Are you outfitting it in some Garmin avionics or what you got up front?
Yep. So I've got a dual G3X set up in my plane. I've talked about it a little bit. I'm using Garmin's experimental. They've got their like the radar altimeter type thing. I forget the specific part number, or else I would say it. Not many of those are in small GA aircraft, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to put it in there. I'm not going to have it call me slanderous words as I'm landing, but I'm going to find a way to see if I can make it do that. But I really love some of the tools that are possible. I've been really hooked on, the the autopilots that Garmin has put together. I'm doing I'm adding 3 servos. So I'll have roll, pitch, and yaw dampening. I'm really kind of going a little all out with my Garmin setup. I'm super excited about it. They make incredible equipment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Shout out to Garmin. Yeah. That's my favorite part about aviation is the avionics. I'm a huge tech nerd. I love big screens. I love a lot of information, and just what Garmin has been able to do from even when I just in 2010 and 2011, when I was taking my first flights, the difference between the 6-packs and just using the little 430 of what we've come from there, and what you can put in an experimental airplane, and now what you can put in what Cirrus just came out with, and then new stuff they got coming out. It's just like, it's crazy. You're like, dang, this is awesome.
Yeah, I've been impressed about the experimental side. I work with specifically their experimental lead, Brad Brensing, and he is I just love how brilliant the team is, how passionate they are about the avionics, about the ways we can find how to use them. And then they're also open, as I've been talking with them, of ways for me to like do things that maybe they haven't done yet, or like, how could I achieve this goal? And I've come up with some crazy stuff. Like one of the ridiculous things I want to put in my plane is an artificial intelligence that literally like, because I haven't announced what I'm doing yet, but I'm putting a couple interesting pieces of equipment in my plane that are going to make something like that possible. And honestly, I would love to be able to like, I'm going to do it for the comedic effect. I literally will have it like, as if I land too hard, it'll sense how hard the landing was and, call me something very mean and aggressive. But I just love the idea that, Garmin they've got such a capable setup that they were like, let's see if we can figure it out. So they're really great.
Yeah. I met Brad a couple weeks ago, and I'm actually flying out to Garmin tomorrow. So I'll tell him to say hi.
Yeah. No, he's the best. Tell him I said hi for sure.
Yeah, they're good dudes and girls. They're awesome out there. I got a couple more questions. We'll wrap it up. But I want to know, have you made any big mistakes in your build so far? Any mistakes that set you back, or that you're just like, oh no?
Yeah, there's a couple good ones. I've definitely spent probably about $1,000 in just replacing parts that I've made a mistake on. The kit's very affordable. It's about like the Super Duty. Their biggest kit is roughly $40,000 for the kit, which you could build it and have your own Super Duty flying for probably less than $100,000 for a brand new airplane with an engine, everything brand spanking new. I have a few parts that I drilled just a little wrong, or I added a hole that I wasn't supposed to. And fortunately, it's very simple to call them up and they'll send me a new part. So that's not been too bad, but you got to pay shipping. I had one really big mistake where, they were very supportive and helped me with it, but they shipped me a box, and for some reason the bottom of the box did not get marked as do not throw, or check under here, and it looked like the floor of the cardboard box. And I threw away a bunch of skins. It would have been pretty expensive to replace. I was mortified by the time I found out, because the box was taking up a huge portion of our hangar. We were like, okay, the box is empty. Great. Let's take it to the dump. Let's get it out. And I'm going to start organizing all these parts. And I should not have done that. It was a huge mistake on my part. And I started organizing the parts, and a few days later, as I'm getting to organize, I'm like, where are these parts? And so I sent them the list, and they're like, that is the most anyone has ever been missing from a kit. Something is wrong. And then I realized I threw away part of that, and they were so supportive. They felt that it was just as much their fault as it was mine, because that part didn't get marked. So they covered the cost of that. I just had to pay for shipping, which was so generous of them. They're an amazing company. I will say I've loved working with Zenith. They're really just the most down-to-earth people. And so it made it not too painful. But fortunately, that's been the worst of it. Everything else I've been pretty meticulous on. Hopefully that will translate into a really great flying aircraft. So
let's hope so. I'm guessing now they put, do not throw away without opening this. There's a big mark on it. Like, hey, don't pull a Wairworthy.
I am one of those people who I am the reason why they made a sign or a rule in the rule book, is because I was the one who made the mistake. So
you're like the reason why it says caution hot on coffee.
Yeah. It was that bad. Like I was so mortified by it. And I didn't tell anybody for like a year, because I was like, this is so embarrassing. And I was like, whatever. I'm going to come clean with a mistake I made. And I posted a video about it and got a lot of support too. They were like, oh, that makes a little more sense. Cause I show, like, as I'm pulling this stuff out, you can see the bottom of the box and it looks like the bottom of the box. But now, and I got teased because they're like, you probably don't open up an Amazon package now without ripping that box apart. And they are absolutely right. I learned real quick. I tear apart boxes.
That's really funny. I had a question, but I just forgot. Oh, do you record everything? Are you like constantly filming just in case you have something? Is it like cameras rolling 24/7, 365? Carson wakes up on, or like what's your setup?
No, so I am pretty. Every time I go in with a goal. I don't just kind of like figure out what I want to do. So I usually have things set up specifically for the project I'm working on that day. I record with, I use my mirrorless camera. I've got like a nice full frame camera that I use to film most of my stuff. It's pretty intentional how I set it up, which can definitely slow down. It's slowed down my build quite a bit, focusing on making sure I'm getting the shot too. I don't record everything, but I do record every part that I put in and attach that gets recorded, but I don't record. Honestly, you'd be shocked at how much of aviation of building your own plane is just sitting and looking at it and thinking, how am I going to solve this problem? How do I want to approach this? How do I do this? And looking at instructions and just, again, it's that measure, then learning from the mistake of throwing away parts early on. It's measure twice, 3 times before you ever cut. And that's been, like, I will say the amount that I've spent on replacing parts outside of the skins has been quite low. I've been really meticulous about like making sure I don't make a lot of mistakes. I've only probably had to replace 3 or 4 parts out of, multiple hundred that I've put in. So it's not been too bad, but I record just about everything that I am installing in the plane.
Carson, I got some rapid fire questions for you. I want you to just say the quickest answer that you can possibly say. Don't explain anything and we'll just go with the roll. All right. You ready?
Okay, let's do it.
What's your favorite airplane of all time? Any airplane?
Oh, honestly, probably the Vision Jet.
Ooh, wow.
Which is weird coming from a bush plane guy. I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to say any other things, but that's a weird one for me. I love that plane.
Ugliest airplane you've ever seen?
Oh, probably the Zenith, which is also fun. I love how ugly my airplane is, though. It's my ugly duckling.
Something you wish you knew before you became a pilot?
How to save money by not... I don't know. There's a lot of ways to save money by just looking up things before you ever do it.
Let's see. Who in the industry would you like to meet most?
Probably Sully. I love his story.
Favorite thing about aviation?
The freedom of flight in general.
What's the worst flight you've ever had?
Probably flying over a large gorge area where I was not expecting the aggressive wind to come on the other side because of the shape of the terrain, and I thought I was going to die, but I did not, so it was good.
Well, I'm glad you didn't. Favorite flight you've ever flown?
Probably any of the times I've gone to Ibex. It's one of the backcountry airstrips in Utah that is it's probably one of my favorite places on earth.
This is a 2-part question. What's your favorite airport to land at, and what's your least favorite airport to land at?
Favorite airport to land at is probably Sedona. Okay. I love landing in Sedona. Least favorite airport to land at was probably Falcon Field in Phoenix. Nothing against Falcon Field. There's just a lot of training traffic.
There's a lot of training traffic there. I totally get that. What's your favorite airport food? So we can do 2-part. You're making a connection. Let's say you're flying up to Salt Lake to go somewhere else, and you're in Salt Lake, and you gotta get some fast food or something to eat. Another one is you're flying your own plane. You're flying your Zenith around, and you go to crew car. What's your go-to food?
I love airport sushi, and that's risky, but I really like airport sushi. I'm one of those people that's like, let's see if I get sick or not. And most of the time it ends up really good. So I like airport sushi. And then crew car, honestly, I really try to eat light when I am flying. I avoid coffee like the plague. I want to survive that next trip. And so I tend to get, honestly, anything bready. I really love bread. So like sandwiches or, croissants, rolls, that kind of stuff.
This is a dumb question for you because you've talked about backcountry for probably about 20 minutes of this hour podcast, but would you rather fly over mountains, beaches, or cities?
Mountains all day.
What's your favorite airline livery?
I really love the vintage, like gold Southwest one.
Really? Fair.
I love that one.
All right, cool. Someone's got to like it. Might as well be you.
I love gold, man.
Yeah, I love it. I always see it as more of like a bad brown though than a gold.
Oh, it's
maybe I should just change the way I think. Maybe I should just think it's gold and I'll like it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with that.
I really like
Airbus or Boeing?
Airbus.
All right. Long trips or short trips? So when I say, would you rather fly one very long trip in your plane, your Zenith, or would you do like 600 touch and goes?
Probably 600 touch and goes.
Hardest check ride, which would probably be your private, since that's the check ride.
My private pilot certificate was my hardest, but it was great.
Yeah. What's the biggest regret you have so far in your aviation career, if you have one?
Not flying more while I've been building my plane.
What's the biggest win of your career so far?
Just the incredible success of my this kit plane build and the amount of people that I've reached, over 80 million people so far.
Yep. And this is it's Piper or Cessna, but if you had to go back in your training all over again, or say you're going to start training your kids, would you put them in a Piper, or would you put them in a Cessna, or would you just stick with the Zenith?
I have never flown in a Piper, so I'm going to have to say Cessna.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I don't like. I love me an M600, but I love looking at one. I've never flown in one, so if I was going to go training, it'd be Cessna.
You're taller though, right? I think I saw you last us. Are you tall? Are you like
I'm 6'1"?
6'1". All right. So I don't think we fit very well in those planes, the Pipers.
Yeah. The Cessna is great.
Yeah. Cessna is. Well, cool,
I'd probably be
Carson,
training them in a backcountry airplane.
Yeah, like the Zenith, right?
Yep, for sure.
Well, Carson, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully this will be coming out here in a couple of days. I'm going to text my editor and be like, hey, dude, I need this out. So let's hope it's on there. I appreciate just hearing your stories, and maybe we'll have to have you come back on again here soon.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I'm super stoked about this. Thanks for having me.